Hey guys, welcome to another video. In today's video, I'll be sharing my knowledge on the tips and tricks that you can apply to make yourself a better player in Hypixel UHC Duels. But before we get started, please consider subscribing if you love Minecraft PvP content, as I work hard to produce great videos for a growing audience. I'm also trying to eventually reach the milestone of 1000 subscribers, so subscribing would dearly help me out. Also, don't forget to leave a like if this video helps you out, or if you simply enjoyed the content. Before we get into the guide, I'd like to reason why I qualified to make this video to begin with. For over 2 years, I've been a pop PvPer, Bed Wars player, and most importantly, a UHC Duels player. Although my stats in the very beginning weren't the greatest, I've certainly improved as I've gone to meet new players who I've learned from throughout the many times I've hopped onto the Hypixel network. I'm currently a UHC Grandmaster 2, I'm actually going to get Grandmaster 3 in this video, and I've definitely had my fair share of playing this game mode. Although my best lifetime win streak is only 105, I am hoping to improve that in the future. But anyway, with that being said, let's get straight into the tips and tricks that can make you a better UHC Duels player. Number 1. Determining your kit layout. If you've never done so before, you'll want to edit your UHC Duels kit layout according to the items you use most. First things first, definitely take that axe out of your default hotbar, as this isn't 1.9 or above PvP. If you ever need to use the axe to break the planks, simply hotkey it back in. Now, let's take a look at what I use. I would consider myself an aggressive player, so I'm going to have 2 lava buckets in my hotbar. If you'd like to be more of a passive player, or one who rarely uses lava, then I'd suggest having 2 water buckets in your hotbar. Moreover, another thing is to make your replacement items really accessible in your inventory. If you notice, whenever you open your inventory, your cursor is probably going to be in the center of your screen, closest to the inventory slot at the very top middle. Knowing this, it would therefore be optimal to place your second stack of blocks, your other liquid bucket, as well as your axe near that area. This way, you'd be able to quickly hotkey for the axe or bucket of liquid, or shift click for the blocks these items into your hotbar, because you won't have to move your mouse as much when navigating through your inventory. It definitely helps if you're hoping to get in and out of your inventory in less than half a second. Number 2. Configure your textures. This next step is quite important if you have a substandard computer, because there's certainly a difference in playability between having high and low frame rate. In certain UHC Duels maps, the glass used in the map design will substantially decrease your frame rate. So simply, you want to enable clear glass and set the option to all. This feature is available in Lunar Client, and of course, you want to use a nice texture pack that you're comfortable to PvP with. In most cases, the pack you're using won't entirely affect your frame rate, but having clear glass on definitely helps you improve it. And if you really want the extra FPS boost, turn down your render distance to a value as low as 2. That's actually what I use. Number 3. Getting used to all of your hotkeys. UHC Duels is a game mode in the sector of rod PvP, and for that reason, the most important hotkeys are the ones for your sword and rod. Thus, find suitable hotkeys for both hotbar slots, in which you can hotkey between the sword and rod up to 4 or 5 times per second, essentially allowing you to spam your rod while infinite rodding. Infinite rodding meaning not pulling back your rod after throwing it out, but rather switching to a different slot, usually the sword, so that your rod never goes down in durability. Being able to hotkey between your sword and rod very quickly is quite essential in today's generation of rod PvP, especially as half the match may consist of players just spamming rods at each other. Nonetheless, you want to ensure that you're able to strafe both left and right while infinite rodding. The default hotkeys to the default slots for your sword and rod, 1 and 2, will not be suitable for this, because it's usually not plausible to press your A key to strafe left while your ring finger reaches for the 1 or 2 key. Therefore, using mouse buttons for your rodding would be the most optimal. It's essentially having your right hand do the sword and rod hotkeying while your left hand just focuses on your movement and sometimes some of your other hotkeys. An alternate option is to simply bind 2 of your mouse buttons to the keys 1 and 2 respectively, allowing yourself to either use your keyboard, your mouse, or both to do the rod hotkeying. All in all, being able to strafe both directions while rodding is going to be very essential in UHC Duels, and being able to infinite rod while you're at it is crucial to ensure that you don't break your rod. Number 4. Rod tricks. If you didn't know, a great part of rod PvP is the ability to do a rod trick. This means combining your rod hit with a sword hit at the same time, and then usually going for another sword hit. How can you do this? In essence, as you approach your opponent, you'll want to continuously rod them until you get close enough to rod them again and spam click with your sword simultaneously as your rod hits the player. Essentially, when the rod hits the player and their entity takes knockback and turns into your hit color, usually red, they will be invincible to another hit from the same item until 500 milliseconds or half a second later. However, because the sword does not do the same attack as the rod, you'll still be able to hit the player with the sword at the same time that your rod hits them, and deal sword damage upon your rod hit. Although the player will not take any knockback, nor will they turn red from your sword hit due to the default 500 millisecond delay between getting hit, the damage you deal from your sword will make the illusion that you've just rodded your opponent and dealt damage to them. Nonetheless, continue by getting a second hit with just a regular sword swing. Combined, this should look like rodding your opponent and spam clicking them while your rod hits them, and then hitting them again right after the 500 millisecond delay. From a second person perspective, this will create the illusion on the other player's end that you did a full sword swing of damage to them as your rod hits them, and then you get another hit with your sword. To be more technical, one tick in Minecraft is equivalent to 50 milliseconds, and the damage invisibility cooldown is 500 milliseconds or 10 ticks. That means, to properly do a rod trick, you must swing at your opponent in range within 10 ticks after your rod lands on them or you won't get it. What's the advantage of rod tricking compared to just hitting your opponent twice with a sword? Well, your rod is a projectile, meaning that you can swing your rod at your opponent and hit them from further than you can do so with a melee swing. Also, when you rod someone who is moving towards you, their movement gets frozen or at least hindered for a moment. Given this, as you approach someone and get a rod on them, from let's say 5 blocks away, assuming that they do not rod you back, you should be able to jump in or move in for a sword hit while their movement is frozen or hindered. Then, simply go for another hit right after. This means that you can start getting a hit from about 5 blocks away, starting with your rod, followed by a sword swing when you approach the appropriate range, and then followed by another sword hit thereafter for the second hit. Of course, if your opponent rods you back while you approach and rod them, you have to continuously rod them back as well so that they do not do the same to you, and until you get that nice opportunity to go for a rod trick hit. This is also what accounts for many great UHC Duels players' matches to just consist of both players spamming their rods for well over half the match. Also, this is an obvious thing, you should always be sprinting. Always have toggle sprint on, because the faster you move, the less knockback you'll take and the less susceptible you'll be to getting comboed. Number 5. Sprint resetting. Sprinting forward at your opponent while you hit them deals the most knockback to them, although only the first hit after you sprint will deal the most knockback, followed by the second, third, fourth, and so on hits to deal considerably less knockback. To always deal the most knockback in every hit, you'll want to reset your sprint between hits to make each of your desired sprint reset hits the quote-unquote first hit after sprinting. To do a sprint reset, either let go of W or your walk forwards key and press it again. Tap and release the S key or your walk backwards key to momentarily break your forward motion. Completely let go of W and press S momentarily, followed by W again to move back and then forwards. Block and unblock your sword. Or sneak and unsneak. Each of these methods hinders your forward movement momentarily, making the game think that you've stopped sprinting and started to sprint once again, thereby allowing each sprint reset hit to deal the most knockback to your opponent. One thing to note though is that if you are hit by a player who has W tapped on you or gotten their first hit after sprinting, you will take a substantial amount of knockback if you are hit whilst not moving forward, basically while you have let go of the W key, or whilst you are moving slowly, even for that split second. So I just want to quickly add a point. Most players who W tap incorrectly will actually fall into this downside, so as you can see, if you take a look at my keystrokes, despite not hitting my opponent, I am still W tapping. Now this is not what you should be doing, because while I am getting hit, I'm not moving forward at some point, and that makes me take a substantial amount of KB. Therefore, make sure that if you are to get hit, you're moving forward at full speed when you do. I suggest playing sumo matches on a practice server like Mine Club to practice W tapping, the primary sprint resetting method. Number 6. Critical hits. As many of you already know, in Minecraft, if you hit a player or entity while falling, you'll get a critical hit, which deals more damage than usual. In PvP, you'll most likely sprint and jump to get critical hits, although moving like that alone is extremely risky and makes you susceptible to being comboed, due to a player having more reach looking up than a player looking down. If you don't already know, reach is measured from your player head. Nevertheless, when you sprint jump forward, you'll be moving faster, and this is like the opposite of W tapping or other sprint resetting methods, where you would be moving slower. Therefore, think of sprint jumping to your opponent as the opposite of W tapping to determine when to do it. For instance, when W tapping, your objective is to knock your opponent further away from you, but what if you're knocking them too far? If you knock your opponent too far from you, then they'll simply get out of your combo. That's when you can stop W tapping and just hold W for your next hit to deal less knockback just for that hit, and then continue W tapping afterwards. But to add some spice, add a jump while you hold W for the hit that's meant to deal less knockback for the extra damage. If you would like to continue to go for critical hits, I'd recommend block hitting as the primary sprint resetting method, while also W tapping where necessary to maintain the appropriate distance to continue your combo. Now here I am referring to a jump combo, where you're holding spacebar and just continuously comboing your opponent.
Oh. What?
Anyhow, going for rod tricks followed by a critical hit is extremely effective as it can deal up to 2.5 hearts of damage in about 1 second. However, this is going to take a great amount of practice, so don't expect yourself to get it right away, that is, unless you're just insane at PvP already. Number 7. Using liquids. In Hypixel UHC Duels, each player is given 2 water buckets and 2 lava buckets. Let's first take a look at dealing with lava. When it comes to using lava yourself, you'll want to place the lava on the block that your opponent is standing on in between a hit. Remember the 500 millisecond delay between hits, that is when you'll want to place lava. Also, never hold out your lava bucket approaching your opponent. It pretty much gives it away that you're trying to lava your opponent, giving them the mindset to prepare for it. Instead, during a trade or combo, you'll want to time exactly when you flick your aim downwards and lava your opponent. Simply, during melee combat, you'll want to get one hit, and actually hear the hit to make sure that it registers, especially given Hypixel's terrible hit reg, and then as previously mentioned, flick down and hotkey to your lava bucket simultaneously and place it onto your opponent's feet. Then, flick back up while hotkeying back to your sword or rod and continue trading or continue your combo. It is ultimately your own judgment for whether you take back that lava or not, depending on your opponent's skill level. For example, for less skilled opponents, I'd usually just leave them in the lava, and for skilled opponents, I'd quickly take back the lava if it appears that they tried to water themselves so that I can continuously lava them over and over throughout the fight, distracting them from the melee combat as they tried to water themselves. Nonetheless, in another scenario, your opponent may evade the lava and only catch on fire. They may proceed to go for hits on you whilst being able to take less knockback with the fire damage ticks. In this scenario, you want to go for an extensive amount of rod tricks and critical hits to really make their health go down and force them to worry about being on fire. Ultimately, the use of lava in UHC duels is to distract your opponent from the primary melee combat. Lava is not the way to win, but only a side factor. Moving on to the water buckets. I don't actually use water very often in UHC duels, but I'll go over a few examples of common uses for it. These include quickly watering yourself if you're on fire, placing then picking up the water either on the ground, the wall, or on blocks to distract your opponent to go for sneaky hits, or to completely discard your water when running away to heal by placing it behind you on the ground, hoping to slow down your opponent. Before we move on, I'd like to also go over some further tips and tricks with liquids, featuring the following scenarios. First, in the event that you lose one or both of your lavas, keep your empty bucket in mind and be ready to steal your opponent's lava when given a chance. Although, if they lava you and you have to act fast, don't worry about it and just water yourself, even if it means getting rid of the lava. Second, in the event that you lose both of your waters, yet you still have at least one lava bucket, find an opportunity to lava your opponent and have an empty bucket ready to quickly grab their water when they place it on themselves. Third, if you lose all of your liquids, expect your opponent to lava you and be ready to take it with an empty bucket. If they happen to place the lava directly onto your feet, make sure to take the lava with an empty bucket right away before the lava spreads. You'll remain on fire due to having no water, but take the advantage of the natural KB reduction and go for some nice rod trick combos on your opponent to equalize or further push the damage onto them instead. Note that losing both of your lavas is completely fine and should not affect your ability to effectively fight against your opponent. However, be concerned to never lose your water, because if your opponent lavas you and it spreads, then it'll end quite tragically for you, especially if you get blocked in. In fact, that's what I do to players all the time. I take or remove all of their waters and lava them. Sometimes I box them in with my wooden plank so there's no way to escape. One last tip is that if your opponent is ever next to the wall or beside a pillar of blocks, you can place lava right onto the block and in their face and get easy hits on them whilst they're distracted trying to put themselves out. And if this ever happens to you, simply turn around to face the block that the source of lava is placed on and water yourself on that same block. You should react and do this quickly before the lava spreads. Number 8. Having good game sense with your healing. In UHC Duels, you'll get 6 golden apples and 3 golden heads. The golden apples, or otherwise known as gapples or gaps, will provide you with 2 hearts of absorption as well as 4 seconds of regeneration 3. The golden heads, or otherwise known as just heads, will provide the same healing, as well as speed 1 for about 10 seconds. I'm actually not that sure because I haven't measured, but I'm sure it's around that time. But the important thing here is the regeneration. Unlike normal golden apples which regenerate only 2 hearts, the gapples in Hypixel UHC Duels will regenerate up to 4 hearts. I advise you to never pre-gap in Hypixel UHC Duels, nor should you gap when your health isn't low enough, at least in regular situations. You'll be able to survive longer in Hypixel UHC Duels if you don't waste your healing. Essentially, each piece of healing in UHC Duels is equivalent to a health 2 potion, so you can use that as a reference for when to heal. In other words, you'll be eligible to heal without wasting any healing whenever you have 6 or fewer hearts. Now comes the game sense part. Let's say you're at 8 hearts and your opponent heals, but then get down to 6 hearts after another combat engagement. You should only use a regular golden apple if you're sure that your opponent is far enough from you and will not hit you. Spam blocks to build a barrier in front of you if necessary. Otherwise, I'd advise you to just use a golden head and take advantage of the speed effect and try to go for some combos. And especially if you have the pressure, you don't want to lose that. If you are getting straight lined by your opponent, do not continue to move towards them after you use a head because that will only result in yourself getting further comboed and drained since your opponent already has the comboing momentum. Instead, simply turn back and let yourself get knocked out of the combo and then re-engage. Moreover, when it comes to playing smart and aggressive in UHC Duels, it's always optimal to consume your heads first, given the instant consumption and speed effect to put pressure on your opponent. However, if both you and your opponent are about even in health and you are an appropriate distance away from them, you can choose to use a regular gapple. But remember, don't be reluctant to use your golden heads when necessary. This is actually something I struggled with in the past. You definitely don't want to be gapping while your opponent rod tricks you and crits you out, because that would just drain most of the healing that the golden apple will have to offer anyway. In fact, this is what you should be doing to your opponent. If they are ever gapping and you can sneak in for a hit or two, always go for a rod trick first and then see if you can sneak in a crit. Doing this effectively will completely remove their absorption, and combined with some lava and further rod tricks or combos, you can easily drain their health way past the healing that their gapple even has to offer. Number 9. Effective strafing. All of the previously described tips and tricks will work exceptionally with dealing damage to your opponent, distracting them, and playing with great game sense. However, if your opponent is competent, they will likely spam you with their rod in return. This is where strafing effectively comes in handy. When you rod your opponent, make sure that you are strafing to make it more difficult for them to rod you back. You can choose to either slightly nudge towards the other direction and then continue strafing in the original direction, or just completely strafe the other direction after strafing one direction to rod them. This should be repeated to an extent in which you land your rods and your opponent lands substantially less. Before you go in for your sword hit, you should ensure that you land a rod on them and that they do not. Then, go for the rod trick, followed by lava if you're trading, or combos if you're able to manipulate your opponent and your movement effectively. Speaking of movement manipulation, keep an appropriate distance from your opponent when you combo them so you can maintain your combo momentum without them being able to hit you back at any time. Finally, number 10. Have confidence. When it comes to winning your UHC duels, it's crucial to be confident about your skill and what you're already able to do, especially if you're up against a good player. Speaking of good players, if you'd like to build up your confidence when it comes to PvP, practice playing against a friend who excels in the UHC Duels game mode. In fact, as an experienced player myself, I sometimes even offer to duel my friends Cole and Dawgsrlife to provide them with the necessary experience of what it's like to go up against a good player. So that's going to be the end of the guide covering how to be a strong UHC Duels player. Remember that improvement only comes from practice, and that it would be a great idea to practice against great players, whether it's against those at your skill level or those who are better than you. Another way to improve is to watch the videos from good players for gameplay or playstyle inspiration. Really pay attention to their movement and their routing, because most great players will exemplify these skills to a high degree of effectiveness. Speaking of which, I'm now going to feature a quick edit of some UHC Duels clips that I've gotten. I hope this video helped you out in some way, and I hope you enjoyed the following edit. Happy UHC dueling, and stay safe, be kind, and be great. Bye!
Oh yeah, also, if you reach this point of the video, don't forget to hit the like button.
I also want to take a moment to thank my friend Edwyn for helping me out dearly with this video. He certainly offered a great deal of his time by helping with the demonstrations. But without further ado, let's just get straight into the edit. I hope you enjoy.
So much water, you gon' need a boat, little fuck nigga. I'm surprised that you could stay afloat. East to west, we going coast to coast, little fuck nigga. Ain't spend a dime, I'm on the road. Got 6 mags, they came with a scope. That's 6 flags, she was riding my pole. Got jet lag, but designer my clothes. Bank just closed, but think my wrist too cold. Bitch, I don't play poker, no, he ain't gon' fold. 40 rest in the holster, I don't really reload. And this life is a coaster, your last ride. Pull up in a coupe, candy paint inside. Margiela, my drip, make me feel alright. She want Addy, she a baddie. Okay, just slide. Rat-a-tatty, get the gaddy. AK by my side. Got these niggas seeing colors, like they reppin' gay pride. Big bang, yeah, I can't live without it. What you think? You get money, bitch, I really doubt it. Okay, fishy nigga gonna fry him up, feel late. Yeah, okay, whoa. So much water, you gon' need a boat, little fuck nigga. I'm surprised that you could stay afloat. East to west, we going coast to coast, little fuck nigga. Ain't spend a dime, I'm on the road. Got 6 mags, they came with a scope. That's 6 flags, she was riding my pole. Got jet lag, but designer my clothes. Bank just closed, but think my wrist too cold. Whoa, snowball on my wrist too cold. You don't fit the form, don't fit the mold. Get it back and flip it, that shit was sold. And I be a simple man, yeah. Make her head spin like a ceiling fan, yeah. Bitch, I'm on 10, where you at again? You not my homie, not my friend. Still don't say again, yeah. I've been cutting these bro niggas off, I put them in the basement. I've been ripping and chewing them up like it was mutilation. When they wrong or ain't doing it right, they don't know what to say. 2 to 3 on me, spray it out of my day. So much water, you gon' need a boat, little fuck nigga. I'm surprised that you could stay afloat. East to west, we going coast to coast, little fuck nigga. Ain't spend a dime, I'm on the road. Got 6 mags, they came with a scope. That's 6 flags, she was riding my pole. Got jet lag, but designer my clothes.
Well, I have meds left.
Do I have to give you my gaps again?
Yeah, give me your gaps. Give me another gaps. Yes, gaps.
Alright, here we go.
Else?
So, I go for the hit.